Does the government know the serial numbers of the guns that you own? This is a big question, and the answer is maybe more confusing than the question itself. But here's the truth into what the government knows about the serial numbers of your guns. Now, before I get into it, I do want to thank our sponsor, Jase Medical, for being the only company in the world where a U.S. doctor will prescribe you emergency meds, whether it be emergency antibiotics, just in case. Or maybe your chronic meds, just in case. You know, as we see systems go down, like just the most recent computer hack in the medical system meant many people didn't get their chronic meds on time. But if you happen to have a year's supply from a U.S. doctor and a U.S. pharmacy, this problem does not apply to you anymore. In addition to that, you can get emergency meds for antivirals. So now, you know, we got this whole bird flu scare that the media is trying to push on you. We'll just have antiviral on hand. That's what you're going to take if you get it. It's just good to have this stuff. And it's the only company, you know, I could get this stuff from my doctor, but I have to be sick first. Jase is the only company where you get it from a U.S. doctor and a U.S. pharmacy in advance of having the emergency. That link is below. Obviously, the most significant identifying factor on any of the guns you own is going to be the serial number. It's a very distinct number that's only assigned to that exact firearm. And a lot of questions revolve around, well, does the government know anything about my guns? Do they know what kind of guns I own? Do they know how many guns I own? What do they actually know about the guns I own? Specifically when it comes to the serial numbers, because the serial numbers is going to tell you everything you need to know about that gun. So does the government know your serial numbers? Well, yes and no. And this is a very complicated question to answer, because I think in the long run, it's bigger no. No, they do not. And here's kind of why. Because when you bought that firearm, if you went to an FFL and bought it, what you did was you filled out a NICS background check, and it had the serial number on it. And it doesn't really say a lot about the gun. It says whether it's a long gun or a handgun or a firearm. So, you know, just you pick out which kind of gun that was, but it's going to fit in one of those three categories. And that's really what they know in the NICS system. The NICS system does not really, it's not supposed to give an ability for, you know, like, you can't just look up my name and all of a sudden it's going to give you a readout of every NICS thing that I did. In theory. Now, those NICS reports, those are that's a significant identifying factor. And the reason I don't really believe the NICS system can look that up is because when the ATF is looking for serial numbers, they're looking at that document. That's the document they look at. Now, how do they look at that document? Well, really the only way that they're going to see that document, and that document is going to stay at that FFL until they go out of business. And if they do go out of business, then all those documents get collected by the ATF, and they go into a massive storage facility that looks a lot like the last scene in the Raiders Lost Ark. Just really this kind of like just boxes everywhere of documents. And really the only way that they can surely look up serial numbers is really doing what they call a reverse trace. Now, there's a lot of variables here as well, as far, you know, and we'll come back to those. But the biggest one they're going to do is what's called a reverse trace. So like if, for example, my house gets robbed and somebody steals my guns, and they then sell those guns to a criminal, and then that criminal then goes and commits a crime with those guns, and then they get that gun. Well, they're going to do a reverse trace on it. How they'll do it is if that gun, whatever the brand is, they're going to reach out to that company, and that company's going to say, oh, we sold that gun to this distributor. Then they're going to reach out to that distributor, and that distributor is then going to say, oh, well, I sold it to this gun store, and then they're going to reach out to the gun store, and the gun store is going to say, well, I sold it to you. And then they're going to come to your house and knock on your door and say, hey, we found this gun. Do you know where your gun is? And you got to say, well, my house got broke into, and look at the police report. Something like that. You definitely don't want to let it go somewhere down the path that wasn't an FFL or something. That's why it's important you not just sell your guns to random people. So the reverse trace is only possible because they already have the serial number. To look up a serial number is just a daunting task. Like if they don't have it, to sit there and go, well, let's say they just wanted to know about my guns. That's a daunting task. They'd almost have to go to every gun store around and be like, did you sell a gun to this guy? And then even then, like for them to look up that by my name, I want to kind of go back to the paper, the documents, because this is why I don't like filling out when they say, oh, we changed it, you just fill this laptop out now and you do your next background check through the laptop and not a written form. I don't know. I don't trust that personally. I can't say here's where it's going. I don't know. But I know it's out there like that in a different form than just in the NICS system. So not a big fan of that, personally. I always recommend you fill it out with a piece of paper if you're going to buy something. And in the end, it'd be a daunting task. I think they'd have to be looking for you specifically. Like they can't just go, oh, let's look at all the American guns, who owns the most guns in this town or that town or that town. Like, it'd be a daunting task. Now, I do want to kind of bring up, I watched a movie from the 80s. I can't remember the name of it. What's the name? The one where the Russians come parachuting in and all the teenagers run up to the mountains. And Red Dawn. And I noticed that when the Russians came into their town, they took over the local gun store, and then they just opened up those documents and they're like, oh, here's all the people that have guns. Like it really would be that easy. Like that's the problem with all that documentation being at the FFL, is a person could just go in and just be like, well, let's just look through all this so we could just see who around here has the most guns, or who recently purchased guns, or who. But, the other piece is, like, a lot of times the reason people want to know about the serial numbers is, like, if I have an old lever action rifle, I'm not worried about if the government knows my serial number. But if I have one of those really scary black rifles, well, maybe, I don't want the government to know I have that. Like, they just know you have a long gun. But if they wanted to know who, like, if they for some reason banned those types of rifles, it's not that complicated how they would find out who has them. They would just simply do a reverse trace on a mass scale. So they would then go to like a factory that makes all those, and they'd say, who'd you sell them to? All of them. And they'd have to give the list of numbers, and here's all the distributors we sold them to. And then those distributors would say, well, here's all the gun stores we sold them to. And then all those gun stores would say, well, here's all the people we sold them to. And then that leads them to your door. So, any sort of reverse tracing has been, they're very good at it. That's like their one true tracing system is a reverse trace. But they got to start with the serial number. If they don't have your serial number, there's really nothing they can know about the guns you have, unless they're looking at you specifically. But even then, I just don't think they know it all. They might find one or two by searching FFLs, but I think in the end, there's really no way they can know it all. But if they want to know about that one rifle that they banned, they can do that. So just know that. So there you go. I hope this wasn't more confusing than it was. informative. But in the end, does the government know about your serial numbers? Kinda, but not really. So unless they're looking for a certain thing, and that'd still be a massive effort, but they're very good at it. So just know that. But they'd have to have the serial number to know who owns it. They can't look at your name and get your serial numbers, if that makes sense. They got to look at the serial number, and then they can get your name. So any thoughts or insight on any of that, definitely put it below. Do want to take a moment, so most people watch this channel, non-subscribers, click that subscribe button. It greatly increases the algorithm and our ability to get these messages out. That link is below. But the most important part of this channel is we take prayer requests. So please don't ever hesitate to send that in. Thank you for watching this episode of God, Family, and Guns. And as always, love God, love your family, and love guns.